The sky had been overcast since early morning. By afternoon, a heavy downpour drenched this coastal county in Maine. Even after the rain stopped, lead-grey clouds hung heavily in the sky. On such a gloomy day, the mind grows restless. I had saved a few vintage British true crime magazines, borrowed from friends. But flipping through them now, they just didn't seem to match the heavy, melancholic mood of the weather. I thought about sitting on the couch to chat with my wife, Sarah. But with a sigh, I realized, after 7 years of marriage, sitting by an open window in this stormy weather to recite romantic poetry with your wife isn't quite how things work anymore. No matter how harsh it sounds, it's just reality. I was deep in thought, pondering the cruelty of time and the fleeting happiness of days gone by, when there was a sudden knock on the door. I got up and opened it to find my friend, Kevin. Stepping inside and kicking off his mud-covered long boots, he grinned and said, "What are you doing cooped up inside on a rainy day like this, John? A man with nothing to do only wastes time with idle thoughts. It's a good thing I dropped by. What a dreadfully boring day." Shaking the water off his jacket, Kevin continued, "All right, no use sitting around. Throw on an overcoat. Let's head down to the far end of Old Abbey Lane and visit Arthur Nathan, the occultist. If nothing else, we'll get to hear a weird supernatural story or two. Bizarre, dark tales always hit the spot on a gloomy day like this." "Let's go. I'm in," I replied, wondering why I hadn't thought of Nathan myself. "Hold on, let me grab my coat." "Let's go. I'm in," I replied, wondering why I hadn't thought of Nathan myself. "Hold on, let me grab my coat." The door was opened by Nathan's daughter, Clara. The moment she saw me, she flashed a wide smile and said, "Uncle John, don't tell me you forgot my lace design sketches again today. You always forget, every single time." "I didn't forget today," I said, pulling the sketch out of my pocket and handing it to Clara. Flashing a bright smile, she headed inside, saying, "Have a seat. I'll go call Dad." Hearing that we had arrived, Arthur Nathan came out to the living room, looking genuinely thrilled. It had been a long time since he had found such a dedicated audience and pair of admirers. As he packed the tobacco into his pipe, he cleared his throat and said, "Well, look at this. What brings you guys out in this terrible weather?" I replied, "It was getting pretty depressing cooped up at home, so we came over to hang out. How about a good story tonight, Nathan?" Nathan was visibly pleased. "Have a seat. Make yourselves comfortable," he said. Then he called out, "Clara, sweetie, could you brew some coffee and grab some oatmeal cookies real quick?" Turning back to us, he asked, "So, what kind of story are you guys looking for? You modern kids don't even believe in the supernatural anyway." Kevin chimed in, "Now why would you say that? If we didn't believe, why would we walk all this way in this terrible weather?" Nathan chuckled. "Well, that's just because you're greedy for a good story.
Frankly, skeptics and non-believers always make the best audience for supernatural and ghost stories.
Fidgeting a little in my seat, I said, "You know, Nathan, I've been coming to see you for so long, but you've never actually shown us anything magical. You know, like waving your hand to materialize a coin out of thin air, or turning water into wine with a spell." Nathan looked at me with bright, piercing eyes and said, "Those are very low-level powers, cheap parlor tricks. My occult master strictly forbade me from practicing those. But have I never done them?"
Well, yes. When I was younger, I did a few just to impress foolish people and make a few quick bucks. A true occultist or practitioner of the dark arts never performs tricks on the streets.
Kevin asked, "Is it really true that high-level occultists or mystics can close their eyes and see the entire universe, like sitting right here in Maine and telling you exactly what's happening in London at this very moment?" "Absolutely," Nathan said, taking another drag from his pipe. "If you find a true master and dedicate yourself to the real dark arts, you can do it too. For instance, you would have to take the severed head of a recently deceased criminal and bury it in a fresh grave inside an old graveyard during a new moon. Then, in the dead of night, you sit directly over that spot in a lotus position. Place the left wing of a dead raven on your head and chant a dark seed mantra 100,000 times. Do that, and you too can become all-knowing." Leaning in with curiosity, Kevin asked, "What is that seed mantra?" "I cannot tell you that." Nathan's expression grew dead serious. In the occult tradition, it is strictly forbidden to reveal the sacred mantras of the dark arts to the uninitiated.
Meanwhile, Clara brought in the coffee and cookies. Sipping his coffee, Kevin asked, "Have you ever actually met a real Kapalik or a high-level black magic demonologist face to face?" Nathan went quiet, appearing a bit lost in thought. I urged him, "Come on, Nathan. Tell us. That sounds like a story worth hearing."
With a deep sigh, Nathan said, "All right, I'll tell you. But finish your coffee first. It's a terrifying tale, my friends. It's been a long time since I last thought about it, and even now it gives me goosebumps. It happened during the very early days of my nomadic occult life.
I was only about 22 or 23 at the time, and I just couldn't settle down at home. Out at the far edge of our county, beneath a massive ancient pine tree, a strange-looking gypsy mystic came and set up camp for about a week. He would just sit there silently in front of a flickering campfire.
His hair was completely matted, but his eyes were incredibly calm. Many people from the nearby town would visit and leave him food. He never once tried to draw a crowd by showing off supernatural tricks. It was his honesty that truly drew me to him. One day, I walked out to that old pine tree. As evening faded into darkness, it was just the mystic and me left. Staring into the fire, Without even looking up at me, he said, "Come, step closer and sit down." So I sat. In the glow of the campfire, the mystic stared at my face for a long time. Then, with a heavy sigh, he remarked, "You want to be an occultist, don't you? I see many encounters with mystics in your future. You will attain some power too, but ultimately you are destined to live an ordinary, secular life." I asked him, "You never speak to anyone else, so why are you telling me all this?" The mystic replied, "The mark of the dark arts is on your forehead, but it's faint. It means you will go a certain distance into the darkness, but you will have to turn back."
If I hadn't seen this mark, I wouldn't be talking to you. You have a right to know. Intrigued, I eagerly asked, "What else do you see, holy man?" His expression darkened. "What else I see is not good. Within a year, a great life-threatening danger awaits you. It's a good thing you crossed paths with me. Ever since you sat down, a thick mass of darkness has been hovering and swirling right behind you." Startled, I quickly snapped my head around to look behind me, but the mystic just chuckled and said, "You won't be able to see it, kid, but I can."
Nathan continued. It was a completely isolated spot right at the edge of the pine forest. The firewood was crackling and popping in the campfire. A chill ran down my spine. The mystic said, "I'm going to teach you a protective ritual. It's called the body-binding shield. If you ever feel a supernatural danger approaching or sense an overwhelming dread in your heart, perform this ritual. No matter how powerful a devil comes after you, your life will be spared."
Now watch closely and memorize this incantation. It didn't take me long to learn it. I asked, "But how will I know when the danger is coming?" The mystic replied, "An alarm will go off in your mind. From this day on, I grant you a fraction of sensing power. Whatever comes your way, good or bad, you will feel it in advance."
Nathan took a breath and said, "I returned home. The very next day, that mystic packed up his camp and vanished into thin air. About a month passed. A sudden wanderlust gripped my soul. One day, I actually packed a few clothes, took a mere $10, and walked out the door. I would trek from one county to another, day after day. Back in those days, the people in rural America were incredibly kind-hearted. They treated strangers with immense hospitality. One evening, after hours of walking, I arrived at a secluded, isolated village. The area was lush, filled with apple orchards and dense pine trees. I spotted a prosperous-looking estate with a large farmhouse and about 8 to 10 beautiful wooden cabins surrounding it. I figured I'd ask for shelter there for the night. The moment I stepped into the yard, a tall, dark-complexioned, middle-aged man walked up to me and asked, "What can I do for you, young man?" I replied, "I've traveled a long way, sir. Would it be possible to get a place to stay for the night?" The man instantly welcomed me, sat me down on the porch, and brought me some water to freshen up.
His name was Matthew Cross, the owner of the farmhouse. He owned nearly 50 acres of land. Matthew was a genuinely good man. He arranged a warm dinner for me and sat down to chat. During our conversation, I remarked, "The hospitality in your county is truly wonderful." Matthew sighed and said, "Oh, don't even get me started on that, kid. Not all guests are the same, you know. Just about a week ago, something crazy happened right here at my house."
I asked, "Why? What happened? A robbery or something?" Matthew replied, "I wish it had just been a robbery. Last Monday afternoon, a dark occultist wearing a crimson robe showed up and asked to stay here. I gave him a spot over by the side of the barn. He looked sophisticated, wearing a massive wooden cross or medallion around his neck. Nothing unusual happened that night. But the next morning, as he was preparing to leave, he asked me, 'Who was that girl helping you carry the cooking supplies yesterday?' I told him she was my daughter. I asked why he wanted to know. What that occultist said next made my blood run absolutely cold. He looked me in the eye and said, 'Hand that girl over to me. I will make her my dark consort for my black magic rituals.' He claimed her body carried the unholy sign for it." Astonished, I asked, "And then what happened?" Matthew replied, "What else could I do? My shouting brought the neighbors running, and we ran him off the property. As he was leaving, he glared at me with pure malice and muttered, 'You made a big mistake, Cross. You'll pay for this soon enough.' I listened intently and said, 'That's terrifying. Has he shown his face around here since?' Matthew answered, 'No, he wouldn't dare.' After finishing my dinner, I rested for the night and bid Matthew goodbye the next morning before setting out again.
Nathan set his coffee cup down on the table and began again. After bidding Matthew goodbye, I walked about 15 to 16 miles that day. By evening, I reached a desolate place where there wasn't a single human settlement in sight. A small river cut through a rugged, rocky wasteland. Following the riverbank, I suddenly stumbled upon a creepy, abandoned old graveyard. As far as the eye could see, there were only broken crosses, charred wooden stumps, and remnants of rotting old coffins. Suddenly, a deep, heavy voice boomed from behind me. "What business do you have here?" What a terrifying voice it was. It sounded like gravel being dumped into a metal drum. Startled, I spun around to find a tall, imposing and frightening mystic standing there. His face was covered in a wild, unkempt beard. He wore a blood-red robe, and on his feet were heavy wooden-soled boots. I politely explained that I had lost my way and ended up here by accident. The mystic stared intently at my face for a moment. Then a subtle, cruel smirk lined his bearded face. He said, "Come with me." I followed him into the dense darkness. He lived in a makeshift shack in a secluded corner of the cemetery. The mystic slit open the belly of a dead sparrow, stuffed some strange, sinister substance inside, sealed it in a clay pot, and threw it into the fire to burn. Watching his bizarre and twisted rituals over the next couple of days, I became fully convinced that this man was a
terrifying black magic expert, a demonologist.
One afternoon, the mystic came and sat beside me. He asked, "Do you believe in the destructive powers of nature? Pestilence, floods, war. These are all forms of dark energy. Besides these, there are various invisible, lethal forces that can be awakened through occult devotion. For example, the Vatal. A Vatal is a cruel, ruthless, malevolent entity. Its killing power is absolute. Once awakened, it does not sleep until its task is completed."
A chill ran down my spine. I asked, "And what if it can't complete the task? What if it gets blocked?" The mystic sneered. "Blocking a Vatal is next to impossible. But if somehow it is stopped, it turns back and tears apart the very person who summoned it. This is playing with fire, kid."
The mystic said, "Tonight I will show you the ritual to summon the Vital." Late that night, he began his dark arts. He brought out a doll carved from ash wood, smeared it with oil and a dark red occult pigment, and buried it in the dirt up to its waist. Muttering dark incantations, he poured heavy liquor into a human skull, mixed a pinch of ash into it, and gulped it down. The moment he drank it, his eyes began to glow like burning coals. He ordered me to light a fire with dry wood.
As he tossed fat and other bizarre occult substances into the flames, the air filled with a putrid, burning stench. The mystic erupted into a twisted, distorted laughter. Through the smoke and darkness, I swear I saw a monstrous figure made of thick, black fog rise up, drift into the air, and vanish into the night. My heart went completely cold.
With a fiendish laugh, the mystic said, "Did you see that? Do you know where that Vital is going? About 15 to 20 days ago, a man named Matthew Cross, who lives 20 miles from here, insulted me and ran me off his farm. This Vital I just awakened is heading straight for his house. Tomorrow is the new moon, and I will make the final sacrifice."
That ashwood doll is the effigy of Matthew Cross. Tomorrow I will bind his soul to it and let the Vatal taste Matthew's blood. By the day after tomorrow, Matthew Cross's lifeless body will be lying in his farmhouse yard. A terrifying, gruesome death, and no one will ever suspect a thing.
The mystic's face now looked completely like a rabid wolf to me. Unable to take it anymore, I yelled, "But this is wrong. Murder for the sake of vengeance is a heinous sin." The mystic's eyes flared with rage. "What did you say, you fool? What do you know about this?" I snapped back. "Stop! I won't stay another minute with a parasite of hell like you. I am leaving." I stormed off into the night, leaving the cemetery behind. Behind me, the mystic laughed like a maniac and screamed, "Go then, leave." But mark my words, no one who has ever insulted me has lived to see the light of day for long. Remember that.
Nathan took another puff from his pipe and resumed. The next day, well past noon, after walking relentlessly, I arrived back at Matthew Cross's estate. The entire place felt eerily quiet, as if drained of life. My heart skipped a beat. Standing in the yard, I called out, and Matthew stepped out from inside. Seeing me, he looked as if he had just discovered a lifeline. Hurrying over, he said, "Mr. Nathan, thank God you're here."
I finally feel a bit of hope. I noticed Matthew's eyes were deeply sunken. I asked, "What's wrong, Matthew? Has something happened?" He groaned. "Don't even get me started. Last night, 2 of my healthiest dairy cows suddenly thrashed around in the barn and died. And since this morning, my daughter has been burning up with a severe, raging fever. This is not a good sign at all."
I understood everything. As the dusk grew heavy and shadows deepened, I stood near that isolated pine grove. Suddenly, an overwhelming sensation of a massive danger close at hand gripped me. A strange wave of dread washed over my chest. Why was this happening? Just then, I sensed someone standing silently a few feet away, right by the trunk of a large pine tree. Looking closer, I recognized him. It was that serene gypsy mystic from our town, the one who had promised he would appear when danger loomed. He raised his hand from a distance, blessing me, and vanished into thin air the very next second.
I rushed into the house and told Matthew, "Listen to me, Matthew. Tonight, both your life and mine are in grave danger. No matter what happens tonight, not a single soul from your family must step foot outside the threshold of this house. Pray to the Lord in silence. Now quick, fetch me a mug of water." Matthew brought the water. I chanted the body-binding incantation the mystic had taught me, consecrating the water, and sprinkled it all around the perimeter of the house, cutting an invisible supernatural barrier, a mystic boundary.
I knew that dark demonologist wouldn't spare me either. Tonight was the new moon. Tonight was the night he intended to send the Vatal to finish us off. During the night, Matthew and I sat side by side on the bed in one room. I had drawn another protective boundary with the water around the bed itself. What a terrifying night it was. Just past midnight, a sudden, piercingly cold gust of wind swept through,
shaking the outer pine forest. There had been absolutely no forecast of a storm, yet the wind intensified rapidly, turning into a full-blown tornado. The doors and windows of the house began slamming shut and rattling open violently. The women began weeping in panic inside the house. I shouted over the din, "Nobody go outside. Everyone stay put inside the rooms." Through the deafening roar of the storm, a hideous, unearthly, beast-like howling could be heard. Someone or something disguised within the tempest was desperately trying to breach the house, only to be violently hurled back by an invisible wall time and time again. After this went on for a while, the storm abruptly ceased in an instant.
Everything became dead quiet. Whoever was trying to enter had failed in their malicious intent and retreated.
The frantic pounding in my chest finally slowed down. Matthew looked at me with terror-stricken eyes. I told him, "There's nothing left to fear. I think we made it out alive." The next morning, the fever of Matthew's daughter miraculously broke. I took my leave, and after walking about a mile down the road, I saw the county sheriff and 2 deputies riding past on horses.
I flagged down one of the deputies and asked, "What's the situation, officer? Where are you all headed?" The deputy replied, "There's been a gruesome murder down at the shack in the abandoned cemetery. Some dark occultist was found dead." Shocked, I pressed, "Murdered? How?" The deputy shuddered. "It's horrific. Someone or something completely snapped his neck, twisting his head entirely backward. It doesn't look like the work of a single man. Feels like he was torn apart by a pack."
I understood everything then. The demonologist himself had warned me. If a Vettel is blocked, it turns back and rips apart the very person who summoned it. Ah, what a terrifying, gruesome fate. Nathan released a slow stream of smoke from his pipe and smiled faintly.
Nathan flipped the page of his diary and began the second story. That was many years later. I was sitting with my friend Kevin at a remote, secluded railway station in Maine. The Boston-bound express train was delayed by almost an hour and a half. I lit a cheap cigarette and was pacing up and down the platform when I noticed a man of massive build sitting silently on a stack of bricks at the far end of the platform.
His clothes were incredibly simple. Just a casual shirt, worn-out jeans and slippers. But the sheer uprightness of his posture and the piercing intensity of his gaze carried the undeniable aura of a profound spiritual personality. Unable to suppress my curiosity, I walked over and sat down beside him. To break the ice, I said, "The train is an hour and a half late. Are you catching the same one, sir?"
Without looking at me, the man simply replied, "Yes." After a few brief words, he turned to look at me. With highly intelligent, sharp eyes, he scanned me from head to toe and remarked, "You have crossed paths with a true master, haven't you?" I smiled and asked, "How could you tell?" The man offered a faint smile of his own and said, "One doesn't need to read palms for that, my friend. The light in your eyes and the stillness within you clearly show that you walk the path of the occult. I hope you don't mind me saying so. You are quite a bit younger than me." I replied politely, "No, not at all, sir. Why would I mind?"
"May I ask how old you are? Around 50? The man chuckled. "I'm 72. I'll be 73 this coming spring." I gasped in astonishment. "You're kidding. You don't have a single grey hair." He replied, "And I never will. When my time comes, I'll leave just like this. I practice deep breathing exercises, meditation, and occult rituals daily. That
is what keeps this body resilient.
I learned that his name was Vincent Black, though people often called him Professor Vincent Black, or Vishu, upon first meeting him. He travelled from place to place. I asked, "So where are you headed now?" Vincent went quiet for a moment, then said, "Not too far. Just a few stations down lives Raymond Clark, a brother in the occult. We took our initiation together under the same master. Later, of course, he got into the grain and timber business and made quite a bit of fortune. Ultimately, that money became his undoing."
I sat up straight. How so? Vincent explained. Raymond was murdered about 10 to 12 days ago. He had built a secluded wooden cabin deep inside the pine forest next to his house for his prayers and meditations. He had buried all his hard-earned money right underneath the dirt floor of that cabin. Someone slaughtered him, dug up the floor, and vanished with everything. Whoever did this will have to pay. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You understand? I immediately said, "I'd like to come with you, if you don't mind." Vincent smiled. "Very well, let's go." We arrived at Raymond Clark's village by evening. A heavy shroud of grief hung over Raymond's house. His younger brother, Simon, broke down in tears upon seeing us. He sobbed, "Professor, I don't know who could do such a thing. My brother was a saint of a man. If the killer wanted the money, Raymond would have handed it over willingly. There was absolutely no need to murder him." Vincent asked, "What is the police saying?" Someone from the gathered crowd scoffed. "Don't even get me started on the police. They didn't show up until the afternoon after the murder. We had to sit with the body all night. Killers don't get caught by cops like that." Meanwhile, a tall man wearing a blue shirt sat slightly apart from the crowd on the edge of the porch, listening intently to everyone's conversation. His manners and demeanor seemed a bit more urban compared to the local country folk. He chimed in. "My uncle's soul will never find peace unless the killer is brought to justice. Is there really nothing we can do?" Vincent turned his sharp gaze toward the man and asked, "And who might you be?" The man stammered, caught off guard. I'm Harold, Raymond's nephew. I used to work out of town, but I recently moved back to the village due to poor health." Vincent asked him no further questions. Vincent then turned to Simon and said, "Come, Simon, take us to that cabin in the woods where Raymond used to pray." Holding flashlights and lanterns, we all walked into the dense forest toward the isolated cabin. The place felt desolate and hollow. On the dirt floor, the blood had dried into a grim, dark stain. The killer had clearly dug up the earth to unearth the money. Vincent stared down at the bloodstains and with a choked voice whispered, "Raymond, you chose the life of a family man, but you never abandoned your spiritual path. I am here now, brother. I won't leave until the job is done. Rest easy." He spoke with such absolute certainty, as if he could perceive an invisible, ethereal presence standing right there in the empty darkness. A powerful chill ran completely down my spine. Stepping out of the cabin, I said to Simon,
I must say, Raymond was an incredibly brave man, staying all alone in a secluded place like this at night. Simon sighed and replied, "Well, Duke was always with him, my brother's beloved, massive bloodhound. He had paws like a lion, and his deep, heavy roar could paralyze any stranger with fear. But ever since my brother's death, he has vanished without a trace. We can't find him anywhere." Vincent instantly sat up straight, his eyes widening. "What color was the dog?" Simon answered, "Jet black." Vincent nodded slowly. "All right, we will be spending the night right here in this cabin. Just leave us some milk and some dry firewood." Though completely baffled by the request, Simon agreed. The night grew deeper. All around us, the crickets were chirping relentlessly. Vincent was softly humming an old occult hymn to himself. Meanwhile, Simon came by and left us a mug of fresh milk. After drinking it, I asked, "Tell me, Professor, how were you so sure that Simon didn't murder his brother?" Vincent replied, "A guilty man always carries fear in his eyes, Nathan. Simon's eyes are completely clear. Furthermore, I specifically asked Simon to bring the milk himself, because if the killer wanted to poison our food, he wouldn't be able to use Simon's hands to do it. This milk came directly from Simon's own dairy cows, so I drank it without a single worry."
I then asked, "But what about that bloodhound?" Vincent's tone turned dead serious. "The killer poisoned him and hid the carcass. That dog wouldn't have stayed quiet around a stranger, let alone accept food from his hands. This means the killer is someone incredibly close to Raymond."
Before falling asleep, I questioned him further. "By the way, Professor, why did you bring up that story about Raymond hoarding vintage gold coins and wanting to build an ancient occult chapel back during the evening? Simon distinctly said he knew nothing about any gold." Vincent flashed a mysterious smile and whispered, "Because Raymond never hoarded any gold. That was a story I entirely made up." I bolted upright in shock. "You mean you lied? Why?"
Vincent chuckled. "The gold exists nowhere except in my imagination. The killer is someone Raymond knew well. He only knew that Raymond hid his cash beneath the dirt floor. Now, hearing about the hidden vintage gold from my mouth, the killer will think, in his haste, he only got the cash, and the real fortune of gold coins is still buried beneath that floor. Greed is a powerful vice, Nathan. To correct his mistake, the killer will inevitably return to this cabin. He won't come tonight because he knows we are staying here. He'll assume that once we leave tomorrow, he can dig up the floor undisturbed. And that is exactly when he will walk right into our trap." The next morning, we bid Simon goodbye and headed toward the railway station. The town elders accompanied us all the way to the town limits. However, upon reaching a secluded spot near the station, Vincent stopped. He said, "Nathan, we aren't going anywhere. We will hide behind the cargo sacks at this station all day today. Then, tonight, we go right back to that cabin in the woods, because the killer is coming tonight."
Terrified, I stammered, "But how are the two of us, unarmed, going to catch an armed murderer? And even if we do catch him, how does that prove he killed Raymond?" Vincent smiled calmly. "Everything is taken care of. Before we left, I explained the entire plan to Simon. Simon, along with his 2 sturdy sons and a few local farmers, will remain wide awake and ready tonight. The moment they hear any commotion or a call from us at the cabin, they will charge in with bats and heavy clubs. We will catch him red-handed." Consumed by sheer curiosity to see how it would all end, I decided to stay. As dusk fell, Vincent turned to me and said, "Nathan, do not enter the village using the main road. Bypass the town and head through the rear pine forest. Go hide behind the dense berry bushes on the eastern side of the cabin. Have no fear. When Vincent Black tells you there is nothing to fear, you are perfectly safe. I will make my way there, using a different path, at the right time." Overwhelmed by the man's hypnotic, commanding personality, I agreed to go alone in the dark. After walking about 6 miles through an unfamiliar, pitch-black trail, I finally crouched down behind the thick shrubbery on the eastern side of Raymond's cabin. By then, the night had grown very late, the kind of dead silence you only experience in deep rural areas. In the distance, a church bell chimed slowly and then faded into the quiet night. Beneath the canopy of the pine forest, the distinct rustling sound of something stepping over dry leaves could be heard from time to time.